Coming up, highlights of the women's basketball game on Wednesday.
Plus the latest update with the Blackhawks.
I'm Elizabeth Winchester.
And I'm Amelia Villhauer.
All this and so much more.
Rambler Sports Locker begins now. Welcome back, Ramblers. We hope everyone had a relaxing holiday and got the chance to sit back and eat some turkey. Elizabeth, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I had a actively productive Thanksgiving, and I got to hang out with my family. But how about you? Did you try anything new?
No, it was pretty typical, run-of-the-mill Thanksgiving break. My family did swap the sweet potatoes for squash this year. Wasn't the biggest fan of that, but you got to work with it.
Well, I'm sad that you didn't get the sweet potatoes because this year we actually tried a sweet potato casserole and it was really good. But that might have had something to do with the cup of sugar I put with the sweet potatoes.
You know what? Whatever makes it good, right?
Yes, exactly. But while some of us might still be getting into the school mindset, trying to get the turkey off our minds, Loyola Sports have been chugging along. Nate Keough is here to give us the Rambler rundown.
Thanks, guys. We are back from Thanksgiving, and the Ramblers had plenty of action to feast upon. Before the break, the women's volleyball team's 17-game win streak came to an end against Dayton 3-1 in the A10 championship match, ending their season. They finished with an overall record of 19-12 and went 16-2 in conference play. The men's basketball team went 1-1 in the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City last week, losing on Wednesday to number 8 Creighton and beating Boston College on Thanksgiving, marking their first Power 5 win of the year. They came back home and defeated Chicago State on Tuesday, 62-53. The women's basketball team lost to rival DePaul on Sunday, 93-72. However, they rambled up to Evanston on Wednesday and won against their rival in Northwestern, 73-68. The track and field season begins today. Both the men's and women's teams will compete in the Purdue Northwest Classic here in Chicago and tomorrow in the Sharon Collier Danville season opener in Boston. That's it for this week's rundown. For Rambler Sports Locker, I'm Nate Keough.
Thanks, Nate. I'm interested to see how the men's and women's basketball seasons will continue to unfold. Did you know that Loyola men's basketball, along with 3 other teams, competed in the 2023 Hall of Fame Classic? If you didn't, don't worry, as Shreeya Pattekar is here to give us her review.
The men's basketball team played in the 2023 Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City last Wednesday and Thursday. The first game on Wednesday against the number 8 Creighton Blue Jays was close, but ended in a loss for the Ramblers. The Ramblers were neck and neck with the Blue Jays in the first half, but were quickly overtaken by Creighton after halftime, with the game ending 88-65. The Ramblers did pull it together on Thursday, defeating Boston College 71-68. Although Loyola secured the lead in the first half, Boston College caught up quickly in the second half. The Ramblers and Eagles went back and forth, but in the last stretch, Loyola's players pushed it. Braden Norris sealed the game with 2 free throws. After this game, they sure had something to be thankful for. Back to you, Amelia.
The men's basketball team is keeping everyone on the edge of their seats this season. Thanks, Shreeya. Now it's time to switch gears and talk about the women's team. Here's Natalie King with the latest.
Wednesday was an exciting day for the women's basketball team. For the first time in history, they beat their crosstown rivals, the Northwestern Wildcats, by a final score of 73-68. The Ramblers' win in Welsh Ryan Arena ended their 25-game losing streak against the Wildcats. Allie Berg scored the first point of the game and continued to be a key player throughout the rest of the game, with a season-high 6 rebounds. Sam Galanopoulos was also a star, scoring a game-high 20 points and ending with a career-high 9 assists. This marked her 4th game in a row scoring in double digits. Loyola's head coach Allison Guth is no stranger to the Northwestern team, as she used to be their assistant coach. She was proud of her team's victory, saying, quote, "I thought that for the most part, we executed both our ball screen coverage and our post-defensive concepts against a very good Northwestern team," end quote. The Ramblers hope to keep their momentum going in their game against Eastern Illinois tomorrow. The game will take place in Gentile Arena with tip-off at noon. Women's basketball isn't the only Loyola team coming off a win. Now here's Caroline Lyngen with a recap of the men's basketball team's game against Chicago State.
Slam dunks, hard layups, and strong threes. The men's basketball team just defeated the Chicago State Cougars in Gentile Arena. We have your highlights. The Ramblers had a slow start to the game with the only baskets in the first 5 minutes coming from Dame Adelicon and Des Watson. The Ramblers picked up steam quickly, though, with 3 back-to-back three-pointers from senior guard Sheldon Edwards. Even with the Ramblers' momentum, the Chicago Cougars came back strong on offense, with number 24, Jayshawn Corbett, leading the team with 11 points in the first half. The Ramblers' defense needed to step up, and that is exactly what they did. In the second half, they held the Cougars to no shots taken in an 11-minute time span. To seal the Ramblers' win, sophomore Jalen Quinn went on a scoring drive, securing the win with an end score of 62-53. The men's basketball team will face Harvard this Saturday in Gentile Arena. Tip-off at 3. For Rambler Sports Locker, I'm Caroline Lyngen.
Thanks, Caroline. The men's basketball team has now won 2 consecutive games. The Ramblers take on Harvard tomorrow. I wonder if they will be able to win a 3rd game. Yes. There have been a lot of stories coming out of the Blackhawks this week. Patrick Kane signed with the Red Wings, but that's not even the biggest story. Abbey Sileo has the story.
This past Tuesday, the Blackhawks announced they placed forward Corey Perry on unconditional waivers after an internal investigation. His waivers cleared the next day, terminating his contract effective immediately. The 19-year NHL veteran signed a 1-year, $4 million contract with the Blackhawks in June. According to General Manager Kyle Davidson, the team pulled Perry from play and conducted the investigation last week after learning he engaged in conduct that violated team policies. At Tuesday's press conference, Davidson said the incident was a workplace matter that did not involve criminal activity or other players and their families. The specifics of the incident remain undisclosed. Perry released a statement Thursday afternoon apologizing for his actions. He says he's seeking treatment from mental health and substance abuse experts to ensure his behavior never happens again. Davidson stepped into his role as GM after former player Kyle Beach came forward with sexual assault allegations against a former staff member in 2021. Regarding the incident's impact going forward, Davidson said, quote, "I think more than anything, it reinforces the resolve we have to change the culture and make sure we're doing the right things, upholding our values, and making sure we continue to build a culture of accountability," end quote. With Perry's termination and Taylor Hall's long-term knee injury, the Blackhawks have lost 2 veteran forwards for the rest of the season. Meanwhile, this incident will continue to raise discussions about safety and accountability across the hockey community. For Rambler Sports Locker, I'm Abbey Sileo.
A surprising turn for the Blackhawks indeed. Thank you, Abbey. Now, folks, I think you know what time it is. That's right, Fun Sports Friday is back with George Gustafson. Take it away, George.
A bird? A plane? Nope. Fun Sport Friday. Welcome back, everyone. I'm George Gustafson, and today we are talking Yukugassen. It is a sport that originated in Japan, where 2 teams of 7 are tasked with either hitting their opponents with snowballs or stealing their flag. But my favorite part about the sport is, of course, its name. Yuki is the Japanese word for snow, and Gassen means battle, bringing this to the top of my best in sports names podium. Like I mentioned, there are 2 objectives in this sport. It's either take out all your opponents and steal their flag, which players do so while wearing maybe the coolest outfits in any sport I've ever seen. The playing field contains walls that you can use for cover, and each team is handed 90 machine-made snowballs before each round. And a best of 3 is used to decide the match winner. Annual Yukugassen tournaments take place all over the world, from Finland to Alaska. For Rambler Sports Locker, I'm George Gustafson.
Just when you think the sports can't get any more fun, we get one with snowballs. Thanks, George.
RSL reporter William Bazzone has returned as our host for The Ramble, joined by Kirstan, Richardson, and Josh Lee. They will be discussing injury prevention in the NFL. Take it away, William.
By golly, everybody, I sure missed hosting The Ramble. I'm sure you guys missed me. If you forgot who I was, I'm William Bazzone, and joining me this week is Kirstan Richardson, and back from injured reserve is Josh Lee. Welcome back, buddy. And speaking of injuries, this week, guys, we've got a topic that's got everybody talking. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that there is over $1 billion worth of money on injured reserve right now. That's including players like Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, unless he makes some miraculous recovery, and I guess Daniel Jones, if he's a star, it's becoming a problem. We're seeing a lot of big injuries, not only to star quarterbacks, but a lot of different players across the league. And it's led NFL legends like Tom Brady to call the league full of mediocrity. So what are we going to do about this? Obviously, injuries are a big part of the sport. They happen. But what should the NFL do to kind of resolve injuries, see them go down, or is there anything at all? Josh, we'll start with you. Again, the new man in town.
Yeah,
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I guess injuries happen anyways. They happen either way, accidents or not. But for me, I think it's just like, what can you do daily? What can the NFL, change when it comes to like practices specifically? I'm a big 49ers guy. I'm from the Bay Area. And so last year, they were doing 4 or 5 practices a week, one more than usually all the other teams. And then they found out that it caused more injuries. It caused more fatigue to the players. And they realized after they stopped doing those extra practice, the injuries started to slow down. So for me, it's just, practice a little less and focus on more getting like game time reps.
I think that's a good point. I think that's one thing that people don't really talk about a lot is the idea of obviously practice makes perfect, but you don't want to have your players going too hard in practice. Because I mean, even we saw like Trayvon Diggs for the Cowboys, right? I mean, he tore his ACL in practice, right? I mean, it's just these are unfortunate things that happen. So maybe it has to do with fewer practices. But Kirstan, we'll turn it over to you. Anything that you see that the NFL could change here?
Well, first off, I got to point out the obvious thing. I think one of the major reasons why a lot of players are getting injured, I think of turf, artificial turf.
Of course.
Players have talked about it for a couple of years now that
right.
Artificial turfs are just not their style. Some, they just don't like how the feel. And we just seen guys getting injured a lot. Like I could think of OBJ getting injured during the Super Bowl and how that was such a big deal on its own. So I think the main thing we need to do is try to figure out a way to get rid of these turfs, because if the guys are vocally saying like, hey, we don't like this turf, we need to go back to original grass or like another type of turf, then that should be the first thing that the NFL should be thinking about.
I think that's a really good point. I think there are statistics even from the NFLPA over the last, I believe it was from 2012 to 2018, so they looked at it about 5 or 6 years ago, but players have a 28% higher rate of non-contact lower extremity injuries, so that includes like ACL, any kind of knee injury, something like that, when playing on artificial turf compared to natural grass. And I think in the recent like anonymous player survey that The Athletic did, everybody wants to get rid of artificial turf. So I think that is a really good point. But what about this? This is a really hypothetical thing. I'm putting this out there. So the teams with high aspirations and high-end QBs, what if they just sat them until it mattered, right? Because I feel like in the last few years, it's really been like the luckiest team that seems to like win the Super Bowl, the one that's been able to like escape and get through the playoffs. And just, do you think that's a factor that teams should consider, like sitting your star guys until it matters? Obviously, we talked about resting in the NBA and how that's bad, but if we're seeing mediocre games for weeks and weeks and weeks in the middle of the season when it's exciting, like why don't we rest our players until the games actually matter?
Yeah. For me, I was going to bring up the load management for basketball. I guess it's really just, coming from, it's different for each team. And I think you're right. I think it's, if they're really, let's say the Eagles right now, they're contending, and they don't want to get Jalen Hurts hurt.
Right.
I think, maybe week 15, week 16, like those weeks, I wouldn't be opposed to them sitting Jalen Hurts and starting, third string quarterback just to get some reps in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I would be for that.
Right. I think it's an interesting thing to consider. And even if you gave them rest throughout the season, like Philly's playing like Carolina, right? Would you want to put Jalen Hurts in that kind of situation to like potentially get himself injured in a game that I don't want to say they should win, but it's a game that doesn't really have a lot of implications.
Yeah.
So that's just an interesting point. Kirstan, anything to add to that?
No, I agree with this point. I feel like it depends on the schedule for each team. If there's a string of highly contested games, maybe like resting might not be the best option. Maybe like down to like the last 5 minutes of the game, or maybe like in the last quarter, maybe we can rest. But yeah, I feel like it depends on the stakes of it, the team's record. If there's a must-win moment for that team, they might need to bring their quarterback out and play. But just in the sake of just trying to make sure that these guys are safe, I'm not against it at all.
Absolutely, and we saw with Joe Burrow, right? I mean, he wasn't on the injury report. He was wearing a brace on his hand before the game, and then all of a sudden we're seeing him not even be able to throw a football, right? I mean, that was super scary to see. And, he was hurt in the beginning of the season, right? And those games didn't necessarily matter. and now they might not even make the playoffs. So definitely some interesting food for thought here, guys. We'll be very excited to know your thoughts. Let us know, form your own opinion, and follow us on our social media accounts to let us know what you think. We'll swing it back to the anchors to finish up the show, and we'll see you next week with a brand new edition of The Ramble.
Thanks, everyone. All very good points. While I think many of us wish that this is an open and shut case, I think it's a bit more complicated than we think. Only time will tell how the NFL will handle limiting risk on the field.
You got that right, Elizabeth.
That wraps up this episode of Rambler Sports Locker.
To stay up to date on all things Rambler Sports, be sure to follow us on X, TikTok, and Instagram at Loyola RSL, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
From all of us here at Rambler Sports Locker, I'm Elizabeth Winchester.
And I'm Amelia Villhauer.
We'll see you next week, and don't forget to turn off the lights.